All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we discuss the dental lease. My name is Adam, content marketing specialist with Schein, and I'll be your moderator. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A, and we will answer them live at the end. This webinar is presented by Schein Dental Business Institute, and no CE credits are being offered. I am excited to welcome back Eric Pook as our speaker today. Eric is Managing Director with Cirrus Consulting Group and has spoken a few times with us this year on this very topic, so today should be very informative for you all. With that, Eric, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Adam. And it's a pleasure to be back. Pretty miraculous thinking the first one was back end of March and then through August and now into November. It's interesting to see how much has changed and certainly how much has also not changed through it. But it's been pretty remarkable. I've had the privilege and honor to now do 3 of these and speak to hundreds of you and your colleagues from Anchorage to Honolulu to Halifax to Key West and everything in between. So really looking forward to sharing a bit of what we're seeing on the dental office lease and the negotiation environment, and really, quite frankly, a huge shift from being such a landlord-friendly space and market to now being much more tenant-friendly, based on the unbelievable impact of COVID, which ironically yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the first diagnosed case, and no one saw this coming. But interesting, as we've talked about the phased return on the first webinar, and some of the key things to help protect cash flow, to help see this as a glass half full perspective. And look at things on how to capitalize on the uniqueness of the environment and the economy. So really looking forward to sharing some key components today. This has been, overall, we've had thousands of doctors register for this course. This specifically now is really about how we can take advantage of the impact on COVID, on the local real estate market, how we can help to renegotiate or negotiate one of our largest hits to overhead, which is the commercial office lease. And it was really interesting. Back in March and April, of course, one of the biggest impacts were, as everyone laid off their staff and went into shutdown, suddenly the number one hit to your overhead was the lease and tenancy expense. And suddenly you could hear a gasp, right, heard coast to coast of doctors realizing that, where is my lease? Where is my landlord? How do I contact them? How do I get some rental help? And unfortunately, many of you wouldn't even get a call back from the landlord. Or some of you, as a ploy, the landlord said, send me 3 years of audited financial statements just to contemplate doing a 1-month deferral. So I would say there's a large amount of angst, anger, and really a desire to help ensure that the agreement between that your dental office and the landlord is fair. And that's really the core purpose of today. So today's a fully interactive, customized live webinar. Can't thank you enough for your time. Looking forward to sharing some best practices through here. We're going to do an interactive poll here in a moment to get a sense in terms of the room, in terms of what situation you're at with the practice, where you sit with your lease or being owner occupied, and also looking forward to really customizing some of the content today based on some of the situations for the many of you that are in the room today. So Adam, if you have an opportunity to pull up the first poll. So a couple of key questions here. Number one is the goal of taking today's webinar. If it's for just general knowledge, if you're looking on some specific guidance regarding a lease situation or something in pertaining to the relationship with your landlord, if there is an issue with the lease or coming up for renewal or renegotiation, or for many of you, I know there's just a big sense of questioning about what impact COVID has had on the local market rents. So that's question one. If you have a quick moment to fill that out as we go. Number two, current situation. This is helpful. I've had a great number of conversations with many of you with that sort of Rockefeller approach, which is how do we help to look at the glass half full? How do we help to look at the opportunity to either expand or potentially relocate or to potentially move towards transitioning and selling, or do we hunker down and battle it out over the next few years? So a little bit about your current situation. And then question number three, in terms of when your lease is expiring, if it's in a month-to-month basis, Definitely we'll touch on why that's a risky proposition and some of the leverage you have with your upcoming landlord negotiation. And then last but not least, again, for those of you that are curious as to what your local rental rates and vacancies are in your market, there's a little section for number 4. Click yes. It will help to schedule a rental rate analysis. So if you can take a quick second, we'll customize the content based on some of the feedback here. And we'll give people another minute to fill that out. Again, as a great component, as Adam mentioned, I am one of the faculty members of the Dental Business Institute, which is a fantastic organization of industry experts at Henry Schein that are typically flying in at this time of year into West Allis with a little bit of snow and shear to come in and run 4 different sessions throughout their headquarters, now done virtually. So we're looking at really taking all the best practices of almost considered like a dental MBA, right, to help grow and expand the clinic and how to help to really be a forerunner in your market. So again, very honored to help share some of these best practices that we've seen. And I wanted to start off today with a couple of key components. So a couple of key numbers that I always share as an example are 85, 54, and 80. 85, 54, and 80. And in all the lectures of the Dental Business Institute, we always start with these 3 because typically it helps to give us in the right frame of mind of the importance of the dental office lease. Number 1 is that 85% per our data shows that dentists have an office lease that can prevent them from ever selling their practice. For those of you that do have a dental office lease in a digital version close by, I would encourage you to open it up, follow along as we go. This is the assignment and subletting section that principally dictates, again, if you can sell the practice or how much control the landlord has with the actual assignment of that lease. So 85% can have a lease that can prevent them from assigning that lease, which is usually a requirement of sale. In addition to that, 54% of dentists are now overpaying in rent in their practice. And unfortunately, based on COVID, or fortunately, many more doctors are overpaying in rent. And that's principally because of the supply and demand, the increase in vacancies, which, as many of you can attest on your drive to work this morning, if you counted more than a dozen for lease sign on your drive, I'm sure that the thought came through is to say, I wonder what, right, rental rates have done in my market. So we've got some upcoming graphs here to show you across some of the major markets throughout the US. And last but not least, 80, which is 80% of landlords structure the lease to give them the right to at least 50% of the proceeds when the practice is sold. And this is absolutely something we continue to see through COVID. We've continued to see landlords in many cases either become a little more desperate because of the vacancies, and many mom and pop landlords are now very anxious and needing your rent in order to make their mortgage obligations, or landlords very aggressively trying to secure long-term deals to shore up their long-term tenants, such as you, which makes for, quite frankly, one of the best tenants on the planet. So really just a little bit of background in terms of who we are and what we do to help and why we were selected by Schein almost a decade ago to be a member of the Dental Business Institute, to be one of their practice services partners throughout North America. So number 1, we are very unique. We are the only healthcare specialized tenant representation firm of a kind in North America. We are hyper specialists in terms of what we do all day, every day is working with dentists and representing them with the landlords to negotiate the letter of intents and agreements to help structure a great long-term deal, both on the financial as well as the business clauses. We're unique. We were founded by a group of dentists 26 years ago in 1994 because doctors were graduating directly out of dental school, similar to today, without any significant business experience. And before they knew it, they were signing a lease on the trunk of a broker's car of a binding letter of intent and suddenly paying more than market price or signing up for all sorts of other clauses within the lease that had impacts of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what's unique with us is the structure of our company. So we have an in-house consulting team that every day is working with doctors to help discuss a negotiation treatment plan, how to create leverage with the landlord, and to help identify some of the issues within the core lease agreements through some of our lease reviews. In addition to that, we have a real estate analytics group that helps to pull up all of those rental rates, vacancies, months on market, building reports, title searches, demographics. We have access to incredible amounts of information. So we know exactly what the trends are in your local markets throughout the country. In addition to that, we also have our lease negotiation team, comprised of which some have been with us now for over 17 years. Again, incredible experience negotiating probably the most amount of dental office leases than anyone else in the world. We also have commercial real estate attorneys on staff that all day, every day are focused on representing our clients and negotiating great deals. And also some that have used to work for the national landlords. So those that typically used to negotiate against dentists, we've now hired them from the dark side to, in essence, now represent the doctor. So again, as we deal with the landlord, it's very much like a dentist speaking to a dentist. We know how their incentives work, how their year-end motivations work, and we've got 26 years of intellectual capital and language that we've been able to really help structure a unique lease for the dental community. Again, we do hundreds of these. We represent 500 plus doctors per year, hundreds of these continuing education courses. So the purpose of today, again, there's a great question and answer period. So I would encourage you through the Q&A section. I see there's also some questions submitted through here. Feel free to post some of the questions and we'll answer those as we go. And I know there was many of you that had also requested some help even before the course, and we'll certainly be following up with those if we haven't already. So really the purpose of today, based on client feedback from the past 2 events we've done thus far, is we're going to be running through some of those market trends. We're going to be touching on the 7 key financial variables to properly negotiate in your upcoming lease renewal. Let that be with a new start, acquisition, additional point, or renewal, or planning for transitioning, or even those that own their own building. Very important, especially through COVID, heaven forbid something were to happen to you, to have a properly structured agreement to separate the corporation that owns your practice from your corporation that owns the building. Well, also, the number one question we get is how? How, Eric? How do I approach my landlord? How do I negotiate favorable terms? And how do I know what winning really looks like? And also, what's worked, right? Across the hundreds of active negotiations we have today, what's working and how do we help to improve upon that? Also, what are some of the $100,000 risks that are hidden within the lease that, especially through COVID, can be devastating for the practice, and how do we protect ourselves? So this is really a positive webinar to help structure yourself, to empower you, to really look at the lease agreement with a greater sense of importance. And we're not trying to make everyone experts here, but we do want to help to make sure that there's a level of awareness, as well as an opportunity to provide a solution to help ensure that the lease is aligned to the unique needs of our dental clinics. All right, so market trends. So here's what we're seeing across the country. So number one is rentals, rents, vacancies, months on market, and sales volume. It has really, from coast to coast, has been impacted due to COVID. Vacancies, principally, we're seeing a rise across the board. Rents are either staying constant or seeing some downward pressure, especially in some of the major markets, Manhattan and otherwise. Months on market. This is a big one. This means that if you or your neighbor was to walk away from your clinic or your space, how many months would it take for your landlord to fill that space? And for many of you, right, from Anchorage through to Des Moines, Iowa, and everything in between, in some cases it's doubled, meaning that the value to keep you in your space and to retain your business has gone up because the landlord realizes it's not just going to be 4 or 6 months, it's going to be 10 to 12 months to find someone to fill that vacancy. And that's a long time without any rent. And unfortunately, depending on how your lease is structured, you may be carrying more of the bag for common area maintenance and other fees if there's other vacancies in your space. And of course, the sales volume or leasing volume in many cases is down dramatically throughout the country. So the landlord's responses. So this is pretty interesting. I wanted to share this because we're now seeing two separate paths. So in the negotiations with landlords, in some cases, many of them are drawing the line and they're saying, look, we have to make our mortgage obligations. And therefore, they're looking at their existing book and rental rolls and saying, who can we squeeze the most? And who, right, has the highest opportunity cost if they were to relocate? And unfortunately, the dental office with the $100 to $200 per square foot build-out cost, they realize that most dentists don't want to relocate. So they'll either go, right, from a high, right, premium price and try to get as much rent as possible out of their existing clientele, or penetration pricing strategy where they'll obviously try to reduce the rent, structure a great long-term deal, and be very flexible. In many cases, most landlords are trying the primary, which is to see how much they can get from the dental tenants, right, in terms of rental increases, which again, you might think is crazy based on the environment, but look at it from the landlord's perspective. There's a high degree of necessity to ensure that with other vacancies, who else is going to help to bridge that gap? Also, we had a lot of success with setting up rent deferrals or abatements. Again, help with the landlord through the process. Unfortunately, many of you had the landlord say, no, we're not willing to help. We're not willing to do any deferrals. Some of you got a really scary 10-page lease amending agreement just to defer 1 month worth of rent in March and June. They were sliding in things in some cases with asking for personal guarantees or indemnifications, which was nuts, or they were sliding in demolition clauses, all in exchange of simply a 1 month deferral. So if, for example, if there are still outstanding rents owing, or if you did not get that properly amended and the landlord or the property managers just said, you know what, don't worry about it, Dr. Smith, let's just regroup in the fall. Very important that you are there to ask some of those, to make sure that that's properly structured in the lease. Because if you missed payments or in default, you might not even know it. And that could have some significant impacts. Perfect. So I see a couple of questions about some posing questions. Worst case, if you're able to not do it through the Q&A section, feel free to pose it to the panelists, and I'm happy to go through those as well. I can see the chats through here as well. Okay, just another couple of quick updates. Renewal and new starts definitely right now is an incredible time if your lease is coming up within the next 2 or 3 years. It does give you a lot of leverage if you're in a month-to-month basis. Again, the landlords are typically quite anxious to be securing long-term revenue so that they can go back to their banks or otherwise and show that they've got an agreement and a revenue stream and receivables coming in, right, over the next period of 5 or 10 plus years. All right, so to the market updates. So here's Boston. So what we're looking at here, again, for those of you that are on your road or unable to join via the video, I'll try to describe it the best way. We're looking at vacancies here in orange. We're looking at rental rates here in blue. So very interesting based on the algorithms, the machine learning, and based on what we're seeing and trending is that, for example, the Boston market, as we look at, we're seeing that shift. We're seeing a dip now in terms of the rental rates. We're seeing an increase and a continual planned increase in vacancy rates. And we do see some downward pricing as it pertains to things leveling out in early 2021, meaning that if you're in Boston or many other areas of the country, right, it does yield the fact that as vacancies are rising, it's putting downward pressure on rent. Similar story in Chicago, right? We're forecasting a significant increase in vacancies. As you can see, it's gone down to about 7.8%. And rental rates have been continually increasing. We are seeing and estimating that there will be some downward pressure on rent as the vacancies continue to increase, and then we see things leveling off. Of course, vaccines are now being announced and coming through, so that obviously throws things out. But definitely it does create a very unique period of time today that before the landlords create COVID amnesia, it's a great unique time to say and to help renegotiate, similar to 2008, which was a very unique window of about 12 to 18 months that doctors were able to negotiate or renegotiate their rents or build out a clinic right through the last Great Recession in 2008. Orlando, close to my folks in Florida, we're seeing again continual increase on market rents, continual drop in vacancies, and again yielding some favorable conditions now, being more dental friendly. San Francisco, the old state where was my old stomping grounds. Again, it was incredibly a landlord-friendly market, and candidly still is, but it is certainly shifting back. We're not seeing some of the crazy rates and landlords being very obtuse. We're seeing a lot more desire to secure good long-term lease at fair rates. We've just recently completed the lease for Dr. Sam Thatcher, the dentist for the San Francisco Giants. If you haven't seen it, there's a great video, a letter of thanks that he shared, all the financial wins. We were able to get him almost $8,000 worth of tenant improvement allowance. We removed the landlord's ability to relocate the practice or demolish the practice. We were also able to completely amend the ability to sell the practice and no longer be held personally or continually liable. So again, that was Dr. Sam Thatcher, dentist for the San Francisco Giants, a great case study through our website and the Schein website as well. Manhattan and New York, very unique time, of course. There are some decreasing rates, a lot of change going on in that market. Everything is pretty unique. I pulled up a recent one for Queens as an example, and just a prime example that just the submarket leasing activity is down 31% year over year. And on average now in Queens, New York, and Fresh Meadows specifically, we're now seeing that it's over 8.8 months, up 3.2 months year over year in terms of how long it'll take for the landlord to fill a vacancy in that market. So if you have any questions about, title searches or assessments and otherwise, specifically within your markets, please, there'll be another poll at the end, or the ability to request a complimentary lease review or rental rate analysis. Strongly suggest, and we're happy to pull up these reports for you and walk you through the impact of what it would be in your market. Lots of interesting sort of demographic trends, changes, population sizes, lots of information here as we look forward. Okay, so to the financials. So ask yourself the question, when you're negotiating the financials, let's try to think of as many as possible that we could potentially use with the landlord to maximize our leverage and to minimize our total tenancy expense over the long term. Okay, so what did we think of? Number one, feel free to post that in the chat as well, or post any questions through there. Number one, I'm sure, is what you've thought is base rent. Everybody thinks of base rent. How much am I paying today? Right? And what does that look like on a per square foot basis? Most of the country, it's on an annual basis. Down towards California and other markets is looking at on a monthly basis on a price per square foot. But that's the big one. And of course, to find out accurately, you got to have the facts. You got to have the data. You got to know what the comparable rates are in your market. If you're curious, let us know. We're happy to schedule a call with you to run through it and pull up some of those reports. Number two is the annual increase. And this typically is up there, but overlooked. And to share what's working today, we've been very successful with leveraging long-term leases with a landlord and to say, look, COVID is unusual. We're in a second wave. We don't know what revenue is going to be. We took a massive hit this year. Yes, production is getting back to levels pre-COVID or very close to it. Of course, we're not telling the landlord that, but we're doing our best to get back on track. But what's been helpful is to help structure a flatness. So meaning if we can secure the rental rates at a set rate for year 1, 2, or even 3, and then an escalation, and then keeping 3, 4, or 4, 5, and 6 at a flat rate. In essence, what we're doing now is we're helping to flatten the curve. And that can have a few different examples, but my explanation is as it pertains to your rental rates. If it's just going up by 3% every single year, well, if your revenue isn't going up by 3% per year, or it's going down, then of course, right, your financial and profit situation is going to be less and less each year. So best scenario and strategy is to properly negotiate that and to help to reduce those annual increases as much as possible. And those are some best practices that we've seen some success with. Get a lot of questions about common area maintenance. Is your lease a triple net lease, meaning base rent plus, plus, plus? And therefore, what are your additional fees that you're responsible for? One doctor up in Santa Clara had a change of ownership. The new landlord came in and unfortunately looked through the leases and found that the lease was not a gross lease, meaning everything was included. It was actually a modified gross. So the doctor got an invoice for over $20,000 for part of the property taxes and other components of the lease that were just never billed. So it's very important to know what your rights and obligations are within the common area maintenance, and also to look at what should be included or excluded. If suddenly you now have a number of vacancies in your mall, in your building, or otherwise, are your CAM fees going up, or will they, and will you have a surprise at the end of the year? In most cases, if you never had anyone helping you professionally to negotiate your lease, most likely, if vacancies have gone up, your common area maintenance share will also increase in terms of some of the fees. And you may be paying for additional brokerage fees or legal fees, or if they're redoing the roof or parking lot, you might be paying more than your fair share. So there's a lot of ways through common area maintenance caps or exclusions or an amortization period. There's lots of ways of helping to avoid some of those surprises. And then for those of you in newer buildings, right, those CAM fees can almost be 50, 60% of what your base rent is. All right. I see some hands up. If you do have some questions, feel free to add it to the Q&A section or into the chat as well. Fixturing. Looks like we're touching on some nerves here. So fixturing period. So this is very relevant for anyone looking at expanding in their spaces or potentially relocating. Fixturing, by definition, is the period of time from getting a copy of the keys from the landlord, turning the keys, coming in or walking into that empty space. And it's the time principally from building out while you're fixing up your practice. That's the time that you should have a fixturing period. Very reasonable to be asking for many months, not to be responsible for base rent. Probably you'll be asked to be responsible for common area maintenance, but very likely that while you're building out your practice, you shouldn't have to be hit with base rent. So principally, we like to ask for about 6 months worth of a fixturing period or up until the time that you're open. Then after that fixturing period, which of course could have tens of thousands of dollars of savings or benefit, then that becomes free rent. After your lease starts, right? Just like leasing a car, month 1, month 2, month 3 of, right, 240 months, right, will give you a specific breakdown where you should be able to ask for and be successful in getting multiple months of free rent. Again, you're building out a brand new area, new clinic, or you're expanding or relocating, right? You all know very well the hit to overhead is significant. So if we can do everything possible to reduce the upfront hit to cash flow, that obviously helps the lenders get you approved. It avoids you having to spend more time as an associate in another practice, right? And it just helps to reduce that immediate hit to cash flow. Another big one is tenant improvement allowance, and we get a lot of questions about this. I like to refer to tenant improvement allowance as a bit of a fool's gold. What I mean by that is this. First of all, it's great, and it makes sense. You're about to build out a beautiful new clinic, and of course, every dollar that you put in for walls, medical grade plumbing, electrical, vacuum lines, etc., obviously becomes ownership of the landlord right away. So it makes sense that the landlord's giving you $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 per square foot in tenant improvement allowance. However, it is not free money, and the landlord definitely is not in the lending business. So it's important to know what impact that has. Principally, it's baked into your base rent or annual increase. So in many cases, it can increase and compound year after year after year. And it's almost like the loan that you can never pay off. So in many cases, the way that we approach the financial negotiations are, well, what would it be with X amount, $40 per square foot of tenant improvement allowance? And also, what would it look like if we took $0? And what if we got a great loan from Bank of America that has a great 18-month program on right now at 1%? what would that look like in terms of a reduction in base rent or a reduction in annual increase to help reduce your total tenancy expense, which could be tens or potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 10 to 20 plus years. The last one is landlord work. So if the landlord's contractors are able to build out a medically accessible, wheelchair accessible bathroom or do some of the initial work for you, right? What can that do to reduce your costs and have the landlord bear some of that expense? That can be down to placement of the sewer line, or in terms of making sure that the water intake pipe is a full inch instead of a half inch, which in some cases, some doctors have had tens of thousands of dollars of bills afterwards because suddenly now the compressor's not working, the handpiece aren't working, purely because of the fact that within the lease, it wasn't clear as to what the needs were, right, for the intake of water lines. So these are all the type of things that this is what we do all day, every day, but it's important to know what you're getting into. Again, if you're not sure about any of these things, feel free, if you've got a copy of your lease handy, feel free to email us a copy at info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. We'll schedule a specific call and we'll help to review it to see, right, what impact is in your lease, right, and where some of the financial negotiables are for you. And so let's talk about this now. So how, right? This is a big how-to course. How? Eric, how do I, first of all, I don't feel like I have leverage. The biggest frustration I have, speaking to the dental community, is the feeling of lack of leverage or a sense of worry or a sense of guilt, almost is a good way of looking at it, that, you know what, I've had a profitable, successful business, and I guess it's just my penalty to have to pay these high rents. And most doctors fall into the trap that the landlord set by saying, you know what, hey, you're great. I've got 12 other dentists who want to take over your location. So if you don't sign here right now with this increase, you're out the door, right? Please, doctors, starting from today's onwards, remind yourself that, in my opinion, you are the best commercial real estate tenants on the planet. Why? Well, number one, right, you have some of the lowest default rates in the industry, 0.5%. Number two is you have some of the highest build-out costs of any other commercial tenants on the planet. Also, you bring in incredible and high-quality foot traffic, right? Of course, your build-out costs, right, are there. That gives them a great asset that you are now affixing all of that work and money to their asset. Plus, on average, the dental clinic is there for over 26 years on average. So even after you sell, right, that clinic is still there. So it is the closest thing to a sure thing. And of course, with COVID now, with different bubble teas and sandwich places and otherwise, going under and going vacant, this now creates a perfect component that the dentist can never work from home. So you now have become the new anchor tenant, and therefore you should have a lease that's aligned with that. So take a second now, envision yourself as the landlord. Some of you are, right? Some of you own your own buildings or have other tenants in your building today that you own. But put yourself in the landlord's shoes. You've got a number of vacancies. You've got significant mortgage obligations. And looking across your spectrum of gyms and other professional services that have moved out, or high-tech firms that are now all working from home indefinitely, right? I mean, even through Silicon Valley, we're seeing major shifts now in the commercial real estate market. So put yourselves in the landlord's shoes. What's the closest thing to a sure thing to help to protect themselves and their business? Right? And medical dental should be right at the top of the list. So again, you represent a fantastic resource. Also do the math. Look at your base rent, common area maintenance, annual improvement. Most of you are looking at over $1 to $2 million of total financial commitment to the landlord, right? They do the math, and so should you. But what a great business. They can come back to you and say, you know what, Dr. Smith, fantastic. Good news, I'm just increasing your rent by 5 cents per square foot per month. Congratulations, sign here, simple one-pager, right? And what it does is, it's what most people don't realize, is it's still binding. The original governing lease from 1992 is still the governing document. And when it comes time to sell or otherwise, that is key. The other main takeaway today is to plan ahead, right? Prepare for those negotiations, get the data, and then last but not least, prioritize what is most important, right? For those of you that have had a lease review with us before, we talk about what's in our need to have buckets, personal guarantees, demolition, restoration rights, etc. What's our nice to haves, exclusivity, use provision, base rent improvements, annual increase improvements. And then the third bucket is what are the things that we're willing to concede in order to achieve our must-haves. Unfortunately, what most doctors do is they skip section 1, 2, and 3 and say, oh, geez, my lease is coming due. I better call my landlord right away. And instantly fall right into the trap where the landlord can then defer, delay, and wait as long as possible. Another big example that I've spent a lot of time talking to many of you about is sort of having your cake and eat it too, which means that think about it for a second, right? As you're driving and leaving your office today, and look across the road and look at all those vacancies and wonder how much that landlord across the street would be dying to have you as a tenant, to have a dentist sign a 10-year lease with 2 5-year options, to build at a new practice from scratch and bring in high quality foot traffic from across the road. They would be jumping through hoops to earn that business. So therefore, some of the strategies we're doing today is we're negotiating or renegotiating the current lease, and then also, right, putting a fishing line in the water to see how anxious the landlord across the street or down the road is to earn your business. And talking to a doctor last night, right, who is in a left-hand, right, built practice. And she's contemplating, what should I do? When should I make the change? Well, if you don't look at what other landlords would be doing to potentially attract your business for the long term, and you're a mid-career dentist, then candidly, you owe it to yourself to at least see what that would look like to rip the Band-Aid off and potentially relocate your practice. It is an incredible time to do so. And some landlords, we had one example recently where the landlord covered almost all of the new build-out costs. That was in Northern California. Doctor wrote us a beautiful 5-star Google review, said it was the best money she's ever spent on her practice. But again, it's important that we prioritize those. And if nothing else, we want to keep our current landlord honest that we're paying fair rents today. A quick question that just came through right on topic, so I'll answer it as we go. Should I be responsible for costs involved in updating the office space, like painting and cleaning carpets, etc.? So one of the first questions there, Doctor, is when is your lease coming up for renewal? Just like we did for Dr. Thatcher's office, which is the one in San Francisco I referenced earlier, we were able to get them roughly $6,000 or $7,000 of tenant improvement allowance. So if you're coming up for renewal, very likely that we can ask for some of those tenant improvement allowances for new carpeting or flooring, especially if you've been in there for 15 years, you've always paid your rent on time. It's a great time to ask. Many landlords do have budget for that. And yes, so that very, very common, we were able to help another doctor get $15,000 towards a new HVAC system. So don't underestimate the value of proper representation in helping to get what you're looking for. A couple of components in the essence of time, just to stress, again, remember from today how important the dental office lease is, right? It really does provide either a rock solid concrete foundation to build your business upon, or a crumbling shell that could cost hundreds of thousands down the road to try to get it fixed. If there was any delinquencies or defaults or default notices, very important that there's a proper amendment that if they did give you 2 or 3 months of deferred rent, very important that you have a properly signed agreement to reflect that. Also, in addition to that, it's costly. And if the landlord were to not allow you to exercise your option or cause any other types of issues or kick you out or redevelop the space or relocate you, right, it could be devastating, especially if you're not planning for it. So again, the lease is critical through this. And as many of you know, some of you have just wanted to walk away from your practice. Eric, my spouse wants me to stop practicing and walk away. And we review the lease, and there's things like a restoration or surrender clause, which in essence states that whatever it looked like when you originally built out that clinic, or the doctor you acquired that clinic, whatever it looked like, any of those leasehold improvements, you now, doctor, have the responsibility for all the demolition costs to return it back to a pre-dental condition. And that can be $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, depending on the size and space. So in some cases, it's not just as easy as saying, hey, I want to walk away, or I want to move, or I want to, start practicing with a colleague, or just sell my charts, right? Don't get into that situation where you're already sold your charts, you're sailing away, and then suddenly, oh, I guess I better look at my lease before I just hand back the keys. And last but not least, again, it gives you great leverage, right? Because again, with COVID, with what it's done is it's created a very unique shift in power, right? To be much more tenant friendly than it has been in years, right? So let's talk about it for a second. If we could wave the magic wand and say, what can we do for us? What can we do? Another great question, which I will touch on shortly, Doctor. Can we add a new clause in our new leases dealing with COVID type situations and disasters? So let's keep that one live for a moment. I'm going to circle back on that because is there COVID language? Short answer is no. However, we are finding good ways for especially new starts to be able to have some flexibility that if there's a second wave or shutdown or otherwise, shelter in place, et cetera, what are ways that we can protect ourselves if there's factors outside of our control? So what should it do? Well, first of all, it should give you fair and affordable financial terms. We touched on those 7 before. Most doctors only focus on 1 or 2. Number 2 is it should be giving us predictability and continuity, typically a 5-year or 10-year term with 2 or 3 5-year options, and making sure they're transferable options. So when you go to sell, the buyer can get a loan from Bank of America or Wells or otherwise, and give them enough term that they can get approved for a 10-year payback period, right? If there's only a year left on the lease, very, very difficult for that buyer to get financing because there's no predictability of revenue because they could be out in a year. Minimizing your risk and exposure. One big takeaway, doctors, this afternoon, to make sure is included in your next lease renewal is something called a death and disability clause. A death and disability clause. So this is something that we helped coin 26 years ago that helped to get our household name in dental. This is a specific clause that's negotiated all the way in the original proposals to state that in essence, that heaven forbid something were to happen to you or your ability to practice wet finger dentistry, then you or your estate have the ability to terminate the lease with as little as 60 or 90 days notice and be absolved of that remaining liability. Or in some cases, if, heaven forbid, like my godfather, right, had rotator cuff issues, had to sell his practice at 52, far earlier than he ever thought, can be absolutely devastating, and it was, right? That would also give the ability that as you're not deemed disabled, but from a dental perspective, right, it does give you the relief. And sure, there's insurance, but again, why would you want the insurance to go to something like the lease when the lease could have sections within there to help protect you from that ongoing liability? So death and disability clause, again, can't stress enough how important that is to have in your lease agreements and for it to be dental specific language, another great component. So again, all of you, please, death and disability, very important. And in addition to that, flexibility, right? You should have the ability that if, heaven forbid, something were to happen to you, there was a doctor north of our office who had built out a beautiful 6-operatory practice. 3 weeks prior to the grand opening, had passed away due to a massive heart attack. Fully built out practice, no doctor, no patients. Ladies and gentlemen, what is that practice worth? In this case, unfortunately, nothing, less than nothing, where unfortunately the bank, right, is then taking the loan through life insurance or otherwise. And the landlord said, very sorry to hear that, but now the estate the lease is binding to the successors or heirs. So the spouse was now responsible for the remaining 9.5 years on the lease at over $8,000 per month, increasing at 4% per year. These are the type of examples that it is devastating and why it's so important that, especially with the unknown of COVID and the impact of that to your practice, right? You've worked far too hard to not have help and helpful language in your practice that either allows your estate to help sell the practice for you, if heaven forbid you weren't there, or right, if you own your own building and you don't have a proper lease separating that, it can be an absolute mess for your estate to figure out. Or as a worst case scenario, you're just walking away from all the value you've created with all the goodwill and patience and charts to now suddenly leave the landlord to be in control as to if and how you can sell it. So again, can't stress that enough. And obviously the ability to sell that practice through the assignment and subletting section. Okay, so Dr. B, great question about COVID clauses. So let's touch on that now. This is the one slide that we probably get the most amount of questions about. So for the few hundred of you here, have a look and start to see which ones are you aware of and which ones you're not. Bottom line, these are all negotiable one way or another. It just depends on how important they are for us. The first question from earlier is, can we add pandemic language? The short answer is no. However, when it does come time to fixturing or build outs or other things, we are starting to be creative to insert some extra language that does give us a little extra flexibility. Or some of you received very ugly language letters from your landlord in March that basically, stated that, doctor, we see that you're in the strip mall. We see that your clinic is closed. However, per your lease, regardless of the fact that you're not legally allowed to be open for the shelter in place, we're finding you in default purely because of the fact that you are responsible for being continually open throughout the entire process. So again, there's a lot of ways to ensure that you don't have a minimum hours of operation clause, or that you have the ability to go on vacation and not have to keep things lit, open, and staffed, which is a major component. Some other components here, alterations. If you've made any significant changes to your place or operatory due to COVID, and you did not get landlord's approval, that could be an issue. Most landlords, even minor cosmetic changes, you must be getting written approval. And if not, that can impact your ability to renew your lease or a whole bunch of other ability even to sell the practice if you have made unapproved alterations without the landlord's prior written consent. We touched on fixturing period, termination language. So again, if you're doing a build out or expansion or otherwise, if the landlord can't deliver it to you due to a variety of reasons, by a specific date, then you should be able to terminate that expansion opportunity or relocation through that. Continuous operation, that was the one I mentioned before, if you have holiday or otherwise. Assignment, we're going to touch on here in a moment. Demolition, we're seeing a lot more landlords try to sneak that in, or relocation rights. Very common now that landlords are wanting the ability that if they can get if they've had all these beautiful vacancies and end cap spaces, well, if someone wants to take over half the floor in your medical office and you're the only one in between, right? You can better believe that the landlord and their team is going to be reading through your lease with a fine-tooth comb. And if there's something called a relocation clause, you might only have 60 days notice or less. And in many cases, you will be responsible for the vast majority of the build-out cost to relocate your practice. And what's interesting is it's not even the lack of production in a relocation example, a forced relocation. It's actually the patient attrition, where patients go down the hall or down the street and they never come back for any of the months that your light's out. Death and disability, for those of you that just joined, again, very important in your renewal, you are adding a death and disability right that heaven forbid something happens to you, yourself or the estate has the ability to terminate the lease early. Surrender, we touched on earlier, being able to walk away without having to return it to pre-dental condition. If you are in a month-to-month scenario, very, very important that you're aware of if you have an overholding provision or a holding over, which basically means that if you're month-to-month, the landlord has the right to increase to 150 or 200% of base rent, and they could go back all the way to when you started to be month-to-month. So if some of you are thinking, hey, I'm month to month, this is great, right? Be very, very cautious. right? Typically, there's no advantage not being under term. And if you were trying to sell, what are you selling? The landlord, in some cases, at a necessity, would go directly to the buyer, right? And let me ask you the question, how much is your practice worth without the location? Right? If the landlord leapfrogged you and started negotiating directly with the buyer of your practice, and now suddenly they're just buying the charts and maybe some depreciated shares and equipment. So again, can't stress enough some of the importance. Personal guarantees. A lot of people, especially some of our groups and enterprises, have realized that if they've had the same name tenant, or if they're named personally on the lease, in the event of any disputes with the landlord has the right to go after you first or leapfrog your corporation. So those that are just thinking about walking away and sailing off into the sunset, it might not be that easy. For some of you, even after you sell, there's a continuous liability clause that states that if the new doctor defaults or causes a leak or any performance issues, the landlord can go after you and your personal assets first. We've seen many examples of that over the year. A doctor in Michigan relocated to Florida, got a phone call years later of the doctor he sold to, right, became in default, and he was responsible for the delta and the difference, right, and the remaining term on the lease. So the continuing liability clause in the assignment and subletting section should be key, and that's reflected here. So this example, as you can see, is specifically now, right, aligned with the fact that in the event you are to sell your practice, this is the language that specifies if and how you can sell your practice. In the essence of time, it basically states here in orange that first, you cannot sell without the prior written consent of the landlord, number one. And then number two in orange, it states that the landlord, just for asking, the landlord will have the option to either A, approve the tenant's request, 2, decline it, or 3, terminate the lease as of the effective date of the closing date when you're looking to sell the practice. So yes, just for asking to sell your practice, the landlord may have termination rights, right? Leaving you now without a space and now scrambling to sell your charts. Right? These are why we get so passionate about these components, because most doctors have no idea that this is hiding in their lease. The impact could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. In other examples here, but the fifth section down, the landlord shall have the right to revise the minimum rent to be paid during the remainder of the term to the greater of the then current market rate or 15% greater than the current rent today. Meaning that you're on the world's most boring roller coaster, that even now, as rates are coming down and you're trying to renegotiate, if you exercise that option, it's only going up, and it's going up by at least 15%, right? So be cautious about the small print within the leases. And you've never had it professionally reviewed, there has never been a better time to do so, and you'll have an option to do that towards the end. And even in the end, there's consideration language that entitles the landlord to any difference between the amount that you're paying in rent versus the amount that you're getting in either cash or any sort of financial consideration in conjunction with the sale of your practice, right? Again, this is written as if it's for a nail salon or hair salon, not for $1 million dental practice. So it's why it's so important to have a dental specific language in place. So just to finish off, a few core components. What we're really seeing today are a few things. Number one is when to start. You want to start early. The more time and leverage you have, the better. Starting at least 2, in some cases, 2.5 years prior to the expiry is the best time. Number 2 is be aware of when your option to renew deadline date is. If you do not submit written notice to your landlord by that time, your options, those 2 or 3 5-year options, will become null and void. So don't miss those dates. Number 3, to summarize, leverage your leverage. You are one of the best tenants on the planet. If you're not having a lease that's aligned with that, you should. Number 3 is renew versus relocate. If you've ever thought about, making the plunge and potentially relocating down the street or to that beautiful mall down the road, now is the time. If not now, when? Right? And why not try to have your cake and eat it too? negotiate the current lease. And if we need to keep the current landlord honest, let's see what a proposal looks like down the street. So know your KPIs, right? Typically, you should see about 8.32% of your annual collections revenue should be going to your annual tenancy expense, 8.32%. If it's higher than that, that means we have a production or a rent problem. If it's lower than that, we're ahead of the curve and you're ahead of your peers. But about 8.32% when you look at how much of your money is going towards rent and common area maintenance. In addition to that, $250 per chair. If you're producing at more than $250 per chair, might be a perfect opportunity to look at expanding into that adjacent suite next door. And really, to summarize here, it's an unprecedented time to be looking at things as a glass half full and looking at an expansion or relocation, or just to structure a much better lease from where we're at today. So again, take action, be proactive. This is what the landlords are taught, which is, right, if the doctor reaches out on their own and says, hey, you know what, Mr. Landlord, I'd love to start negotiations. What has the landlord done with you in the past? Oh, no, too soon. Come see me in a year. Oh, it's COVID. Oh, we're busy, right? 12 months comes. Hey, doctor, Mr. Landlord, I'd really like to figure out this lease. Oh, no, we're super busy. Come back in a few months. Well, now it's your option to renew deadline. Now you're really sweating, right? Well, now we're only 8 or 6 months out, right? The landlords play this game every single time. It's in their playbook. They will defer, delay as long as possible because why? The more time that you wait, the less likely you are to relocate, the higher rent they can ask for, and they found a way to increase their profitability without increasing their costs, all by waiting and delaying. So what do? Well, we come out with a proposal, right from the get-go, right? And we want to be proactive with structuring the terms. We want to be proactive with structuring the new letter of intent and the proposals to help ensure we have a great long-term lease in place. And that's how we hit them in the wallet. That's how we accomplish some of these great successes. Again, for all of you wondering about what your rental rates are, strongly suggest requesting a lease review or rental rate analysis. You'll have that option in a moment, right? To be able to look through the course content here, we have access to 95 billion square feet. And last but not least, this is our circle of success, where what you want to do first, again, if any of this is rung true with you, number one is get all the information. If you do not have a digital copy or a countersigned by the landlord copy of your lease today, you should, because it's not worth the paper it's written on if you do not have the landlord's agreement. So gather all the information. You can easily ask it as part of the PPP or any other government programs. You're supposed to have a digital copy of that. So definitely request it, and the landlord should send it back to you momentarily. Number two, figure out your goals. Where do you want to be in 5, 10, 15 years? And what does your lease need to do to align with that? Will you have enough term if you want to sell in 5 years? Is there any term left that your buyer can benefit from? Number three, right? Review your lease. Have it professionally reviewed to know what's in your lease, know what you're up against first, get all the data points, comparables, etc., and then determine your end game. Every lease negotiation is a carefully choreographed game of chess, right? You want to think 7 or 8 steps ahead. And unfortunately, right, what have we not done at this point? We have not picked up the phone and called the landlord. What do most doctors do? They skip steps 1 through 5 and pick up the phone and say, oh, I better start negotiating with my landlord. Hey, Mr. Landlord, what do you think about rent? Well, I think rent should be another 10%. Oh, great, right? And now instantly, right, we've taken ourselves back 20 yards on the play. Then it's negotiating the financial, then it's all the business clauses, and then we get to a final form lease agreement. So as mentioned, as we wrap up here for our hour, as appreciation for everyone's time today and to help support all clients of Henry Schein, and those of you that have attended the webinar, we are offering a complimentary lease review, critical dates and risk analysis, where we're able to help structure time with myself or one of the senior consultants to be able to go through your lease to determine some of your goals, objectives, production, also your long-term transition plans, and we'll go through the lease and actually highlight via Zoom or otherwise some of the issues within your lease. And in the end, we'll go through a negotiation treatment plan. So again, for those of you that have a copy of your lease handy, you can certainly email that right now to info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. I've included my personal extension, which runs through to my virtual office and actual office and everything in between. As many of you know, I've spent over 15 hours on the phone per day helping to support the dental community from these previous webinars. You're not alone in all of this. I know some of this can feel overwhelming or concerning, but the first step is knowing. The second step is to thinking positively. You are the best tenants. You have lots of leverage. And, in my opinion, don't wait. If there's vaccines and the economy's back and rolling in 6 or 12 or 24 months, don't look back and say, you know what, I only wish I took a run at my landlord to see through the COVID times how much I could have gotten a preferred or beneficial lease. So again, all my contact information is here. We'll pull up the secondary poll. Please take a minute. You have the option to request that lease review. So a couple of quick questions. Number one is, are you presently a tenant with a lease today? Yes or no? Number two is, when does your lease currently expire? Is it, I'm already expired a month to month, in the next 2 years, 2.5, 2 to 5 years, 5 years plus and beyond? Many of you I know have reached out previously with urgent situations. Pleased to note, yes, we will prioritize your lease reviews first. And then, of course, last but not least, Section 4, for those of you interested in getting that rental rate analysis or complimentary lease review, I cannot stress enough. We've had over 100 5-star Google reviews this year, many of which through the COVID times have just said we appreciate the time and energy that we've spent on a complimentary basis talking about themselves, the business, what's keeping you up at night, and how we can start to think about a glass half full and how to help to, out of necessity, reduce some of those costs, help to negotiate those 7 main financial variables, and help to avoid some of those $100,000 clauses that can be hidden in your lease agreement. Again, we're opening up the plan for questions. We had almost a half an hour of questions on the last webinar. And so you've got a few options here. We have the chat functionality for the few hundred of you that are logged in. So through the chat or through the Q&A section, I'd encourage you to fill out some of those key questions. Everyone should have the poll here just to fill out. Dr. M, you were having trouble submitting questions or answers. I think that was just in regards to the poll. Yes, this is recorded, which we'll certainly be sending out, or you can shoot us an email and we'll do that as well. In addition to that, I see here Dr. David O. Again, if you do want to speak to someone as quickly as possible, my contact information is here. I did allocate some time after the call for anybody that is in an urgent situation. Happy to help out. No different as you would for any of your emergency patients as well. So Dr. David O, happy to assist if you do want to speak. You've got my direct line here. I would certainly suggest requesting one of the lease reviews so we can go through those details. Okay, so Dr. B, then B. So my situation is this. My lease expires in 8 months. My wife and I are general dentists and have built an excellent practice. I need additional space for expansion and would like to be an owner user of my space of 1,200 square feet. What should I do? Large patient base. So Dr. B, I'm obviously just using the first letter of your last name. So I think what we're asking today is, we're in a space today, our lease is expiring. Do I potentially relocate? I'd love to own. What does that mean for me? I'd love to be at a 1,200 square foot space. So this is a great question. So let's touch on this, probably relevant for many of you on the call. So this is the immortal, do I buy or lease question for my next practice. In my opinion, the commercial real estate market has been devastated. And with all the vacancies, the demand for tenants and the downward pressure and the upward pressure for vacancies and downward pressure on rent, it has dramatically impacted the value of commercial real estate buildings. It is a great time to be a tenant for those that bought their own buildings. Again, depending on where they are, but if they've tied up $500,000 or $1 million to buy the building and then build at a new practice, now they've got a massive amount of capital tied up. And candidly, going into the second wave, capital is king. So if you can avoid being pot committed to buy a whole new building and building out that practice, if that location doesn't work out, if you have issues, if there's asbestos, if there's all sorts of craziness with that building that you own, you're now a landlord and you've got all the burden of the building plus the practice. I know lots of doctors that did both, bought both and built out the new practice in their building, and they wish they didn't. So in my opinion, much better off, Dr. B, to yourself and your wife, you've got 2,500 square feet, or you're looking for that. I would see if you can expand into one of the adjacent suites. Many landlords won't tell you, but probably that cleaner next door or otherwise are in default of their lease, and they might be dying to have you move into the adjacent space. So there could be the ability just to move into the space next door, or I can assure you that the landlord down the road would be jumping through hoops to try to secure 2,500 square feet to build that new practice for yourself and your wife. So again, Dr. B, please, happy to schedule a call afterwards and discuss those type of things from that regard. So I see you just had a quick follow-up for that question. And let me just see here. Dr. M, I think you're able to submit to the poll. We appreciate it. Anybody that did have a challenge with the exit poll, not a problem. Feel free to send us a quick email or call to the info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com, and that will get redirected to myself as well as some of our operations team that are standing by to help. Another great question, Dr. L. How difficult is it to negotiate with major companies that manage strip mall locations? Great question. Short answer is it depends, but in our opinion, we've had just as much success with large national REITs, real estate income trusts, as we have from some of the small mom and pops. So in some cases, the large groups, they're used to dealing with attorneys and professionals. Rarely do they deal with the end user. So in essence, they get it, right? They know exactly, we know what makes their shareholders tick. We know what the rent rolls, capitalization rates. We know what sort of financials they're looking for. And also they love to be shoring up their books by year end. So Dr. L, if you're able to secure a long-term lease and enter in negotiations now coming up to year end, then definitely some of those large brokerages or otherwise, trust me, they're very anxious to be securing expansions, renewals, or otherwise, because that's how they're compensated, right? If you sign up a new long-term lease, they're getting commissions from that. We're not brokers. We don't charge the landlords any commissions. We're always hired directly by the doctor to represent their best interests. So to answer your question, yes, even the large landlords, in some cases, they're a little easier because they're used to dealing with professionals that need to make proper amendments to the leases from start to finish. Okay. We still have the question and answers open. Adam, let me know if there's anything I've missed. I still see that we have the vast majority of doctors still on. Here's another one that's come through. Okay, from Dr. Anonymous. Do you represent owners in sale leasebacks? We're seeing that when doctors sell their practices, the buyer immediately sells the real estate and enters a long-term lease. So if it makes sense for the practice aggregator to do it, why doesn't the selling doctor do it first and pocket the proceeds? So interesting component. I think what you're referring to here is that you've got a doctor, or you're aware of a doctor, or you're a doctor that's looking to sell their clinic. As a result, the doctor owns the real estate or is looking to sell the real estate shortly thereafter and enter into that long-term lease, meaning that the selling doctor now becomes the landlord. So again, there's a whole host of scenarios. In many cases, yes, many doctors, when they sell their practice, they want that passive form of revenue by maintaining ownership and receiving the rent from you, right? Like an ongoing annuity for, in exchange for selling the practice. Now, you're right. the details become very, very important. And the selling doctor should absolutely be properly structuring a lease agreement now, early, long before the practice is sold, because it makes it that much easier when you sell it. Look, hey, here's a lease that I've been using for my own practice. Dr. Smith, you're my buyer. I'm just going to assign you the lease that I have. I'm the tenant, or I'm the landlord. You're now the tenant. And that's a nice, smooth transition. Where challenges occur that for the doctor selling the practice, then on the back of a napkin or while the ink is still wet on the lease can cause a major issue because now it's a brand new lease, right? And now the buyer is going to be looking at it and their merger and acquisition attorneys are going to be having all sorts of issues because now you've just created a lease from scratch, right? Far easier to assign the lease that you had as an owner-occupier. To the doctor that posted that, if I didn't answer that properly, happy to have a follow-up conversation with you as well. Sounds like it was a pretty specific situation. But yes, for those of you looking to buy a practice where the doctor is the landlord, very important that you're aware of the obligations. No different if you're the seller and the owner of the real estate today, you got to think about what if the new doctor comes in and wants to relocate and take all the gear? What if they want to paint it, lime green? What if they want to, again, take all the patients down the road in a few years from now? What can they take with them? These are the type of things that you want to get figured out now, long before you even put the practice up for sale. Okay, Dr. W. Looking to either build a new office building, which is more cash than we thought, correct, or lease. In the middle of due diligence for the property with closing on Christmas Eve. That's exciting. A little celebratory rum and eggnog, hopefully. Look at the possibility of leasing. Have identified a potential office building that just finished building out. Typically, how long should a lease negotiation take? Can't be finished before the closing date on the potential purchase property. So the short answer is yes, Dr. James W. The answer is we can be fast if the landlord's fast. However, you don't want to sign a bad lease to be in a month early, right? I can't tell you how many doctors have looked back and said, you know what, shoot, I only wish I took myself an extra month to properly negotiate my lease first, right? Rather than just jumping into it. So, again, we've done some in the matter of weeks. If the landlord's fast, we'll be fast. But typically it can be upwards of 30 to 60, maybe 90 days, depending on the landlord. I do agree. I would say that to tie up all the capital to build a new office building from scratch, if you haven't done it before or you don't have the time to do it, it is a major undertaking. And if you pay someone to do it for you, then that ekes out a lot of the profit. So you're tying up a massive amount of capital into commercial real estate, going into an area where we just don't know what the economy is going to look like over the next few years, right? So again, big components here to be aware of. I would certainly say that, again, try to have your cake and eat it too. Let's determine what the best possible deal is for the bird in the hand of that building that someone else just did prior to COVID. And now they've got this vacant space. I'll bet you that landlord would be, again, dying to secure a long-term lease with you and make it well worth your while. Might as well take advantage of their misfortune to having sunk all that money into a space and now have a vacant space and they're done and they don't have anyone to fill it. I can assure you that they're having some sleepless nights right now, and their bank or stakeholders are definitely breathing down their collar, looking to see how fast they can fill that space. So again, Dr. W, I would certainly suggest scheduling a quick call. We can go through that letter of intent or whatever you've received thus far. Very important that, try to squeeze the best possible deal out from that other person that just sunk all that capital into the space. You might be able to get the best of both worlds, get a fantastic lease and long-term deal without having to tie up, $500,000 or $750,000 to build out your own building. Right. And then worst case, if it wasn't a good location or there was an issue, then you're pot committed, right? It's the opportunity to then sell. Perfect. Dr. W, thank you for your thank you. Any other questions? I see we have the vast majority still on and engaged. Any other additional questions?
I'm not seeing any. I think you answered them all.
Perfect. Well, great to see some familiar names through here. Again, for the hundreds of registrants today, we certainly really do appreciate your time. Again, if there's any additional questions, maybe we've got time for one more here. I see many of you are still logged in, any through the chat or Q&A. Again, can't stress enough, you're not alone in all of this. I understand the absolute amount of sleepless nights. It can be very, very alone to be your own owner-occupier, to be dealing with a landlord who negotiates leases every single day of their life. It can feel that, the world's against you. However, I can suggest take the first step, right? Understand what is committed, what your obligations are, and then realize that there's companies like ours to be able to at least give you the guidance to point you in the right direction, or to take the burden off of you to support you from start to finish. Great question, Dr. K. Can you go over how to do the lease analysis with you? Yeah, great question. So it was on the original registration. It was on the entrance poll. It was on the exit poll. You can certainly go through now, just emailing the information on the screen, info, I-N-F-O, at Cirrus, C-I-R-R-U-S, consultinggroup.com, as well as there might be a link on the exit as well to fill out a web to lead form. So multiple ways, or you can call us. I put up my direct line, 866-739-9075, extension 3255. And we can certainly help out from there. Question here, do you negotiate with the landlord for the dentist or just advise us? So I'm not too sure the full question, Dr. H, but yes, so part of what we do is we want to control the flow of information, negotiating those proposals, letters of intent, agreements, etc., with the landlord. So yes, we do that back and forth communication. We help to go through all those financial clauses we touched on today. Yes, that's what we do. We are the only healthcare specific dental office lease negotiation firm of our kind in North America. Another question here, do you get your fee from the landlord or tenants, meaning the doctor? So yeah, as mentioned before, we're not brokers. We believe, and have for 26 years, and having done 12,000 lease negotiations, we believe that how could we possibly negotiate you the absolute best possible deal down to the lowest penny if the more that you paid in base rent over the term of the lease, we got a commission of that. Very common, there's great brokers out there, but typically they'll have an agreement with the landlord that they'll get 1 or 2% representing the buyer over the term of the lease, which could easily be $20,000 or $30,000 of commission the broker gets just for filling that vacant space and representing you, the doctor. We fundamentally disagree with that. We feel that there's an inherent conflict of interest, that we can't possibly negotiate the best possible deal when there's some backhanded agreement with the landlord that the more you pay in rent, the more that we're getting paid in commission. So to be very clear, no, we are paid directly by the doctor to represent their best interests from start to finish. And we're paid directly and can be done directly through your Henry Schein account as well. Hopefully that answered that question as well. Another question from Dr. Anonymous. Do we get paid even if a transaction does not happen? So I'm not too sure if that's referring to the sale of a practice or if it's a relocation and the lease doesn't go forward. Depending on the situation, typically we're paid on the project. So for example, for many clients that are trying to have their cake and eat it too, that we discussed before, so we would be hired, we would be dealing with the renewal or potentially the relocation, right? So if for whatever reason we didn't go down the path of one location, we would pivot, transfer, and start to negotiate with another location. But regardless, we'll help to get to the point to get to a final form lease agreement that you're satisfied with. So yes, it's some of the key differences from that perspective. And you can think of us as a hard business coach, again, the warm blanket, the steady hand to help walk you through. Some clients call us, part psychologists, to help walk through the process and to help structure when to ask, how to make some improvements from there as well. Dr. G, thank you so much for the great kudos, and we appreciate you enjoyed the presentation today. Perfect. Again, great questions. I'll leave it open for another 30 seconds or so. If anyone else has some dying last minute questions, again, it's been a completely unusual time. And again, you're not alone. First step is let's figure out what's in the lease. Let's figure out what rental rates look in your area. And then let's start to think glass half full. Let's start to get ourselves a great deal because you deserve it. Dr. B, do you do any lease structure work for the doctor owner who will also have other tenants? So I think the question is that a lease creation service, or do you help to guide you about the different types of leases, if it's a triple net, if it's a modified gross or gross lease, and to help structure those two? The short answer is yes. Feel free to select yes for a complimentary lease review. And if you do own your own space and you don't have a lease in place, definitely happy to have those conversations as well and how we can help with that. Another question, Dr. B, another Dr. B. Do you have a means of finding a good location for us to expand our existing office in the same area? Yes. As I went through before, we've got 9.8 billion square feet that we have access throughout the US. All the comparables, vacancies. We have lots of that proprietary real estate data to see what's out there. And again, candidly, there's a lot. There was a doctor in Southern California, close to where I used to work and live. Excuse me. 22% of her production was going towards tenancy expense, and she was sick and tired of being, paying such high rent when she wasn't really seeing any additional foot traffic. So she hired us to renegotiate the current space. And if we couldn't get it down to be more aligned to what she was looking for, right, she wants us to move her across the street. So those are the type of things and the way that we really should be thinking as the entrepreneur to take advantage of the current market today. Another great question from the other Dr. B. Do you have any advice for finding tenants to fill our space? So depends on the situation, but yes, right, we do these courses. We get hundreds and hundreds of doctors asking for help. We see some both on the buyer side, selling side, doctors who are looking to transition out. Some of the first calls already. And then from that perspective, helping to connect the dots. So we're not brokers. We're not involved with selling the practice or commissions on that. But definitely if we can help connect one of the doctors that have wanted to use or wanting some help to help transfer the lease, or to help buy a practice and have a properly structured lease, and another doctor that we're working with looking to sell, then again, depending on the specifics, but yes, if we can connect the dots with some of our database over 26 years, or leverage some of the local Schein team or otherwise to help, yes, we're happy to connect those dots. Perfect. Oof, Adam, I think we almost broke our last record here.
It's pretty close, that's for sure.
I'm just looking through my email. I certainly see lots of initial emails as well for some urgent help. So again, feel free to email info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. I appreciate everyone's extra time. If you do have extra questions, I'll try to protect my voice here, and happy to schedule some one-off calls ASAP or over the weekend as well for any of those that are urgent.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Eric. Always a pleasure to hear from you, and always enjoy learning about the latest with dental leases. And obviously, thank you everyone for attending and your participation in the polls and answering all of those questions. Per Eric's memo, if you would like to schedule a complimentary lease consultation with Cirrus, please do reach out to him and he will get back to you. Additionally, if you have questions that we were unable to answer, you can also reach us at webinars@henryschein.com and we will connect you with Eric as well. The link of today's webinar will be sent out next week via email. So on behalf of Henry Schein Dental Business Institute, thank you again for attending, and everyone have a great evening.
Thank you again, everybody. Greatly appreciated. I saw one extra question just come in from Dr. S about difficult management company. Feel free to reach out. We probably have dealt with them already. And if they're trying to dramatically increase your CAM costs significantly, then happy to assist. Perfect.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, Dr. W, the info at does get redirected to my email address and some of my team as well. So yes, that'll go through me, Dr. W. Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic evening and looking forward to connecting with you soon.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Have a great day.